Hey, what makes you rationally angry? It's a question I asked you on Instagram, on our post, and there are a few things that are listed as the things that make the most people irrationally angry, and a few things are this. One is bad drivers. That's like the number one thing. People say bad drivers all the time. For me, it's those people who don't know the zipper method. Do you know the zipper method? You're in line and people are supposed to go to the top of the line. It's the way to do it. Some of y'all like try to get in the middle of the line. I'm that guy that won't let you in. Go to the front. And I feel like a jerk every time, but you notice that you're never the bad driver. Like it's always someone else. And some of you are lying to yourselves. Another thing people list as a top 10 things are people who eat with their mouth open. You all have that family member, that best friend. You go out on a first date. He's cute, she's cute. You sit down, the meal comes. Yeah, this ain't gonna work. I gotta go, the hospital called me. Do you work at the hospital? No, but I got other things I gotta do. Slow loading screens is now one of the top things that make people rationally angry. Whether it's on your phone or you're on your website, some of you on websites you shouldn't be, and it's slow loading, and some of you get really angry. In fact, we asked you, and on Instagram, there's a number of you who said a few things. One is bossy people, sudden loud noises. Like that, sudden loud noises. My dad being a morning person. I know who that was. I'll tell your father. When people leave their garbage in my car. That was, you could feel the anger on that one. When it snows in September, okay. Yeah. I was mowing my lawn this afternoon, and there were flurries while I was mowing my lawn. Why do we live here? What is the purpose of life? I hate it. It's like Edmonton is a place where you learn all the things you hate about life. And it's just, I personally, like someone who's like a rude assistant, I had to fly with Flair Air last August. You already know where this is going. And I got there really early. Like, I love being at the airport really early, but I mean really early. And I get there, there's no one else in line. I mean, I don't know if you flew with Flair Air, but you do everything for them, like everything. I'm surprised they don't have you load your own baggage on the plane. I'm surprised they don't have an option where you can fly the plane for less. Like, it's just, you do everything. I did my check-in, I did everything. I show up, I'm the only one in line, there's no one else around. And the lady's there, I'm the first customer. And so you think at the beginning of the day, this person will be like, hey, good to see you. I show up, the whole time doesn't look at me in the eyes at all. I'm like, did I do something to offend you in a life that we were a part of before this one? Why are you so angry? And for some reason, it just bugs me when that happens. Or I don't like when I go to a restaurant and someone like I know is a lot younger than me calls me sweetie. Can I get you something, dear? Well, I'm like 10 years older than you. And can you, maybe the first thing is bring me a plate of don't do that again? Like, I know it sounds, and that's the inside Thomas talking, right? That's the unfiltered, Jesus isn't there yet. You know, there's like, no, I'm okay. You know, like, I don't know why I don't enjoy that. I mean, if you're like 50 years old, 60 years old, you call me sweetie, be like, yeah, you can get away from it, right? You can get away with it, no problem. But if you're like 20 years old and you're calling me dear, I know some of you after this can be like, can I get you something, sweetie? And I'll tell you never to come back again. This last August, and we've been saying this as part of the series, we put out this like anonymous website. It's called the Jesus Is Project. And you can let us know anonymously what your thoughts are about Jesus. And no one's gonna write you back, nothing like that. And we had hundreds of responses. And I had someone this last week ask me, were you surprised by any responses that you got off this website? And I was honest, I'm like, actually, I wasn't really surprised by any of the responses. I kind of figured we'd get most of them. I mean, yeah, you can tell some were fairly personal and you couldn't guess that. But what did surprise me was even in just these, when you read them, the amount of emotion that's coming out of some of these responses. Especially the anger, like you can feel the anger in how, like people, it's almost like they broke their keyboard typing it. And I get it. Like, anger is such an interesting emotion. There's like two forms of anger. This isn't like a scientific fact. This is like a Thomasific fact. And there's what I call angry light. It's like when you offer me decaf coffee. I'll be upset with you because you basically offered me garbage. But I can get over it. That's angry. That's angry light. But then there's like angry dark. Angry dark is like, it's coming from a really dark place. It's coming from some sort of hurt. There's like this idea of unresolved issues. There's a systematic problem. There's maybe some injustice. You know it when like you feel it and it's dripping kind of from their lips or it's dripping from the responses I read on this. See, let me tell you a bit of a relationship clue, okay? If you're looking at like how to communicate well, you pay attention to anger dark. You pay attention to this stuff. Why? Because it's telling you a story. It's revealing some sort of value this person has, or it's revealing some sort of systematic maybe injustice they have, or it's revealing something about them, about what they feel and what they believe at a very, very deep level. And this is kind of through some of the responses that I got. Some of you know this. Maybe some of you were there. There's certain topics that are brought up and there's this like deep-seated anger and you know that like it doesn't just resolve itself. That's the kind of anger you pay attention to. And that's kind of a bit what I was surprised by. I was just like, man, even though it was just like written text, I can feel the anger in some of it. The ironic part though, the majority of these responses, they came back really angry. About religion, about Jesus, about the church, Christians, whatever. Ironic part about it is I actually think that Jesus himself was angry at a lot of the exact same things. And showed a lot of maybe misunderstanding, maybe a little miseducation, maybe just maybe a shallow depth when it comes to what Jesus and Christianity is supposed to be about. I mean, the thing that they're angry about was systematic oppression. It was hypocrisy. It was people being judgmental. And honestly, those are a lot of the same things that Jesus was angry about. So we did this series called Jesus Is. Who is Jesus? If we were to kind of strip away and just look at the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which are like 4 letters in the New Testament that were written about Jesus' life and words and who he was, they reveal Jesus to us. What would we be left with? Who is Jesus? Reveals himself to be. And this last month, we've been going over different things that Jesus is. And tonight, we're ending the series on something that I think is the best place to end, and it's this, is that Jesus is better. I know that's a pretty bold statement, but just go with me on this. Everywhere you read of Jesus' life, anytime he goes into a place, it seems like people leave better because of it. There's this story of this woman who had this issue with blood. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She could find no cure. Coming behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. So here's the thing you gotta know. In the first century, this woman would have been considered unclean. And so for 12 whole years, she couldn't be part of a community of believers, of people, because she had this issue with bleeding. And the live blood from someone made you unclean. And for anyone to touch her, they would become unclean. You have to go through this ritual cleansing, all this jazz. So this woman would have literally been like kind of on the outside, left to the fringes on her own for 12 years, not being able to meet with her own people. And you can feel the desperation because she literally, I love this. She's like, screw it. And she starts moving around the car, touching everybody. And everyone's like, ugh, right? Like, and she's just like, I don't care. She heard Jesus around here and didn't even say anything. She just literally grasped his robe. And it says immediately, the 12-year issue was healed. And Jesus is like, whoa, what just happened? You ever drink like, Starbucks has those new lids? Every time I drink from them, I get shocked every time. Anyone else? Okay, just me? Okay. And Jesus felt this sort of, it says that he felt like this power come out of him, and he looked at this woman, he's like, your faith has made you well. And see, everyone else around is like, oh my goodness, like this unclean woman touched Jesus, now he's gonna be unclean. Except the roles are reversed. Jesus is like, no, see, when you touch me, I make you clean. You're gonna leave better. Then you have this next story of this guy. He's been, for 38 years, he's been hanging around what's called the Pool of Bethesda. He's been hanging around, this is where a lot of sick people go. They believe that if you just kind of dip your leg in there, people brought you in, you'd get better. And one of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years, and when Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, would you like to get well? Sometimes Jesus asks really obvious questions. Oh, so you've been sick for 38 years. Do you want to get better? You know? I feel like I'd be the person to be like, well, what do you think? And I'd never get healed, just be like, well, your attitude needs healing first, right? And you know, like, obviously you're not ready. Here I am for another 38 years. And he's like, yeah, I want to get better. 38 years of this one place, and Jesus says, well, pick up your mat and walk. 38 years, his legs are strengthened, he stands up, picks his mat and walks. Jesus died. The disciples are like, oh my goodness, this guy we've been following around for 3 years, he was killed. And it says that at this point, all his followers, they go into this room because they're scared. Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. They're afraid that they're going to come after them now, that they killed this guy. But I love it because Jesus told them, listen, I'll be back in 3 days. But like any man, they don't pay attention to that. And I used man like purposely, by the way. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. I know you're scared. Peace be with you. I'm here. This guy named Thomas, he's a disciple, he follows Jesus. A lot of jokes about my name come out of this guy, by the way. He's like, hey, Thomas, doubting Thomas? I'm like, yeah, I've not heard that one 38,000 times. And he says this, he's like, listen, I won't believe it. He wasn't there when this happened. I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my finger into them, gross, and place my hand into the wound in the side, grosser. It says that Jesus showed up and then he said to Thomas, look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. I'd be like, I believe you. You know, they're like, don't need to do that. And Thomas was in a place of doubt. He had walked with Jesus for like 3 years, seen all these things. All his friends are like, yo, dude, like seriously, we saw him. We were afraid, but now we're not anymore. Thomas is like, I won't believe it. And Jesus comes in and he makes it better. And he says, listen, I'm going to meet you where your doubt is. Stab your fingers into my side. Wiggle your finger around a little bit. You'll tickle me a bit. But you know, it's like, and Thomas believed. See, it's weird. Wherever Jesus went, things got better. Listen, wherever you're at tonight, wherever you're at, whatever you're struggling with, however you think about yourself, whatever words have been called over you, Jesus calls you to better. That wherever you're at, he doesn't say be better, he says I have made you better. You can't encounter Jesus without coming away going, this was better. Why? Because Jesus is ultimate goodness. We were created for him, by him. Colossians says God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth, and he didn't make a mistake when he made you. And it says that Jesus came to gather what was his. He says, I have other, he called you sheep, okay? But I have other sheep too. Those of you who maybe don't know Jesus yet, that are not in the sheepfold, I must bring them also. He came to gather. When you encounter Jesus, you encounter better. That is Jesus' life. It's unavoidable. I'm sorry. He's always going to want you, move you towards wholeness, towards ultimate goodness. He says, I've come to give life and life to the fullest. Jesus makes things better. But here's the thing. Some, if you read the story, weren't really too pumped about all this thing. They were angry. There was this deep anger. Jesus came to dismantle what kept people from him. That was Jesus' life. He's like, what barriers can I remove that are keeping you from me? But there's some people that just weren't having it. Why? Why were they so angry? Why were they so upset at what Jesus was doing? Well, one is because, honestly, he was interrupting their systems. These people who weren't them weren't like them. These religious leaders, these people who have been maybe following Jesus for a while, or maybe following God and all these laws, they made it difficult for these people to come at Jesus. Because Jesus literally tore their system apart. And Jesus is saying, it's got to be better than your prejudice. It's got to be better. They didn't like Jesus. They were angry because it broke their systems apart. Also because Jesus called them to just stop being so busy. They had this idea where it's like, wait, listen, I've done all this work. Pull up your own bootstraps. Figure it out on your own. Jesus is like, no, you got to understand, this is not me because I am better than the powerful abusing their power over the powerless. He came to dismantle that. They didn't like it also because, well, those people didn't earn it. He's like, no, it's got to be better than just workplace seniority. So you've been here longer, who cares? There's a story of this prodigal son, and he tells his dad, listen, I want my inheritance. I want to go off on my own. And the dad's like, I think it's a real dumb decision, but if that's what you want, go. And he goes and he squanders his wealth and he realizes, man, this is not good. And he comes back and he's scared that his dad's going to be all upset. His dad is this Jesus figure and he looks at him and he says that he's actually watching this. He's been watching. And he sees his son come and he runs towards the son and he just hugs him and embraces him and tells him, listen, you may have left, but you've never left my heart. You've never left this family. I was waiting for you to come home. And it's this beautiful story, this beautiful imagery of how God views us, that he had gone and squandered into what was good, but then realized that it was not God's best. It was not better, so he comes back to better and he's embraced. But his older brother is like, meh, but look what all I have done, right? And he gets angry at it. Because the brother didn't do all the work that he did. And Jesus, he literally dismantled that. Saying, listen, it's not about what you earn. Their anger was rooted in selfish gain, in comfort, in maintaining power, in doing whatever they could to make sure that their system stayed alive. That made Jesus angry. And if there's any kind of anger you should pay attention to, it's when Jesus gets angry. And he did. He calls them out. He says things like this: what sorrows await you, hypocrites? For you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves and you don't let others enter either. He's saying you are keeping people from coming into what they're created for. You're keeping them from being gathered to me. That's what I've come to do. You bunch of hypocrites. You're clean on the outside, but the inside you're full of dead man's bones. He goes to this one place and he's like, Jesus entered the temple, began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. Now, some people, they like to say this is why you shouldn't sell things in church like have a cafe. Nope, that's not what it's saying. What they were doing is they were actually charging either much more for what they're doing. So when people come in, they would actually be unfair weights that they would use, but also they were using it as a way of holding people to their debts that they couldn't pay. So when you come into the temple, the first thing you come against is this reality that you're not good enough, that you have this debt to pay. So Jesus, sometimes we get this picture of Jesus just like this, hippie is like, hey, love everybody. No, he says he actually put together a whip and he drove everyone out and throwing tables everywhere. Because he's like, no one should be stopped from coming into my presence. This other scenario, he's talking with people. He's like, listen, for I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger and you didn't invite me into your home. I was naked and you didn't give me clothing. I was sick and in prison and you didn't visit me. Then they will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not help you? It was a legitimate question. And Jesus responds with this. And he'll answer, I will tell you the truth. When you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are refusing to help me. See, when religion and culture pointed out their bad, Jesus pointed them to better. When they wanted to keep them out, Jesus invited them in. When they wanted to keep them down, he brought them up. When they were struck, Jesus healed. Why? Because Jesus is always better. That's why. Jesus is better. No matter what situation you find yourself in right now, there is something better in store because you can't come into a close encounter with Jesus without being directed to what is better. Because Jesus came to give life and life to the fullest. And this means something for us. It means that you should always expect that Jesus is going to move you towards better. This is why when I meet with some people, one of the main questions I ask is this: what is God's next for you? It presupposes that God is already wanting to lead you to something next, to something else, to something better. I don't know what that is. Maybe some of you, it's just like, well, I want to know him more. I want to read the Bible more. I feel like that's what God's asked me to do. Great. How can I help you do that? I feel like I need to start talking with Jesus. Okay, let me help you do that. And here's the thing. Grace, God is not against effort. This is why sometimes some of you feel that shame and guilt when it comes to watching porn. But it's not like Jesus is like, oh, you're watching porn, you should get out of here. You know why? It's because the industry under that is stripping other people of their value and worth, and it's stripping you of your value and worth, and you were made for better than that. So he's going to move you to better, not because he's shaming you, because he knows you were made for more. He knows that those women and those men were made for more, and that it is less than what he created you for. So he will move you into better. Some of you are struggling with eating disorders or mental health, and you're figuring out, how do I do this? Does God love me? Yeah, he does. And he's going to encourage you to find a bit of help. Why? Because you deserve the help. You deserve to know that there's hope. You deserve to know that there is more in store for you. Why? Because Jesus is better. He's going to move you towards better. He says, go and sin no more. Why? Because he doesn't want something to deprive you of the good that you were created for. Grace is not opposed to effort. It's opposed to earning. Let me say it this way. I'm married. Somehow I convinced her. And somehow I convinced her to stay with me for at least 13 years now. You know, it's funny. It's like when I got married, when you get married, when you're even just in a relationship, getting married doesn't mean that you stop being a slob. It doesn't mean that you're really great at communication skills. It could mean that you got some things to work on. Now, here's the thing. Not working on it won't make you any less married. Your fulfillment in that relationship, though, will definitely be affected. When you come to know Jesus and put your trust in him, everything that you have in your life that you feel like you got to work through, that maybe Jesus is putting his finger on, it doesn't make you any less saved, any less loved. You are loved. You are created to be loved by God, and he has made a way, and his grace is sufficient for all the places that you feel like you don't measure up. And Jesus is like, it's okay. I measure up for you. I've done that. It doesn't make you any less saved, but the freedom you experience in that relationship will be dependent on, are you working at that relationship? Are you seeking freedom in your life from things that are holding you back, that are depriving you from the good that God intended for you? Jesus being better means that there should always be a hope that he's not done with you yet, that he's got something next for you. You know what else it assumes? That if you're a Christian in this room and you claim to follow Jesus, your life should always move others to better, period. This guy, Peter, he writes in his self-titled book, Peter. Most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other, for love covers a multitude of sins. There's this guy named Eugene Peterson. He wrote a translation called The Message, and I love the way he words things, and he says this way. Most of all, love each other as if your life depended on it. Love makes up for practically anything. At the end of the day, you should live a life of love, like your life depended on it. Why? Because God is love. And this isn't some sort of like emotional love. It includes that. Paul, in this letter to the Corinthians, he's writing this very famous love passage that even if you weren't in church, you probably heard this at like every single wedding in the world. Love is patient and kind. Dude, that's not easy. Like we could stop there and be like, ooh, I'll work on that this year. Like I am not patient or kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wrong. Could you imagine being a person who's known for not keeping records of wrongs? It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Who or what are you fighting for? Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That is not easy. That is better than what we see. And our life should be one where we move people always towards better. I want my life, when I come in contact with my kids, come in contact with other people around me, and am I living in a way that it is moving them to know God's better for them? Man, that's a lot of love. Could you imagine if there were people, if we followed Jesus and we knew that this is how God loves you, that love is patient, his love is kind, his love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude, it doesn't demand its own way, it is looking for you, it wants you to know his love. This is how God loves you, but what if you let that love transform you to the point where you love others this way? Man, that's better. Here's the thing though, too busy to love other people is not an excuse. Jesus came and he dismantled that. They're just too different than me is not a justification. Jesus came to dismantle that thinking. It's not how I understand it to be. It's not an option. Jesus came and dismantled that. I honestly think the best work we can do, listen, you and I are not called to point out all the ways someone can't come to God. Our job is to literally remove every single obstacle we possibly can for someone to get to Jesus. The best thing that you and I can possibly do is to bring people to the one we believe in. That is our work. Remove every obstacle we can in their way to get them to Jesus. Because let's say, for example, you meet someone and they're like, yo, this guy's like way off. You saying that doesn't help. Let's say they are off. The only person who can lead that person to better is Jesus himself. So remove every obstacle you possibly can to get them to the table. Get them to Jesus. Our life is to move people towards Jesus. Why? Because his MO is moving people to what they're created for. It's himself. He's good. He's better. This is why we do things like small groups. Because you need a safe place to practice this kind of love. And even Jesus said, listen, I pray that those who follow Jesus would know to love each other really well as an example to the world that we have a different kind of love. But if we can't even love our own well, make time and room for each other, if we're too busy for each other, what kind of testament is that to people who don't know Jesus when we just fight each other? Would we make room? Would we dismantle systems? Would we do whatever we can to make sure that each one of us are loved in a way that we're meant to be loved by Jesus? That was Jesus, one of his last prayers before going to the cross. Would they love each other like we love? Small groups is how we practice this. Jesus will break systems. He'll break prejudices. He'll interrupt your schedule. He'll tear down obstacles. He'll break molds to keep anything from stopping you or anyone from gathering at his feet. He will burn whatever he needs to burn to make sure you know that you are his and he came for you. This is the story of the shepherd who left 99 sheep to go after the one. because he came to seek and save that which was lost. There's 3 consecutive stories about this in this one thing, and whenever Jesus repeats something, you know y'all got to pay attention. Jesus is better. So I ask you tonight, maybe you're here tonight and you're that one that Jesus has gone out to find. That one person in this room who maybe doesn't know that you are highly loved by God. He has a plan, a purpose for your life. That he's inviting you to just come and watch and follow him. And I love this about Jesus. He says, would you come and would you belong and see my life? There's this idea of like, come belong before you believe. There's a sense of come watch my life, come listen, come take a look, come peek inside, find out, is this the real deal or not? And he says, would you come follow? And the reason why I do is because he comes after you, and maybe you're that one tonight. That one, you're hearing Jesus' call, would you come and follow me? That's for you. And all we do is just start here. It's so simple. Do you know that since January till the end of August, we had 120 people text, and at least 55 of those people have gone through the process of walking with Jesus for the first time. 14 alone this month. Because Jesus is not done finding people to prove that they deserve and are meant for better, including you. You could be that one in this room. This could be a start of a change in your life you never thought you could have. For those of you who do follow Jesus, the question remains, are you going to stay in the 99? Or are you going to go do what Jesus did and seek and save that which is lost? Are you going to be that person that prays and believes for that one person in your life who doesn't know Jesus? Listen, there's 150,000 young adults in Edmonton. Majority of them don't know Jesus. And I'm asking you, who's the one you're believing for? Just praying for, you're imagining a better future where you're going to live a way that's going to move them towards better by the way you live, the way you treat other people, and by the experience and encounters you're having with Jesus yourself. And if that's you, I want you to text the 1 to 555-888. It's just a small little commitment of going, I don't know how, I maybe don't even know who right now, but I want to be the kind of person that leads people to better. I'm not going to ask you to do anything else beyond that. Seriously, I promise you. It's just a way of a personal commitment. I want to move people towards better. Let me pray for you tonight. God, I don't know always how you do it. I mean, I look at my life and I look how there's been times where it doesn't feel like you're leading me to better. I'm kind of like, where are you leading me? But I see as I've just trusted you through it, God, I've noticed that you've done things in and through my life that is way beyond me. And the only way I can explain it is that, Jesus, what happens when we trust you and we come close to you is that you move to us towards better. God, for every person in this room, maybe that one person here tonight who they feel like they're the one that you've been calling, would you come follow? God, I pray tonight they would know that it's this one bit of trust of going, I'll just start. God, I pray that they would know that you would leave it all to come after them. That's a huge amount of love. For those tonight who do follow you and they just sense that going, who am I going to believe for? Who am I going to live for? God, I pray that all of us would think that way. That our main job here is to lead people to do whatever we can to break down whatever barriers, whatever obstacles, to get people close to you. Because God, when you happen, unbelievable things happen. Thank you that, God, you are not done with me yet, because, man, like, I've got a lot of work left over. So thank you that you're not done with me. But, God, that you're not done with any of us. Amen. Guys, thanks for hanging out tonight. Thanks for being here. See you next week to start a new series. Go sign up for some small groups, yo. See you out there.